Yeah, this book is meant for first-time entrepreneurs, ideally, who are a technologist or other functional background, who don't have a comprehensive business background. It is written for them to plan their entire journey of building a company based on a product idea and scaling it up. See, there are thousands of books on entrepreneurship. Actually, if you look at the market, perhaps even every month there are hundreds of books published on entrepreneurship. But what I found is most of those entrepreneurship books are either written by very successful people who talk about their experiences, which are very nice to learn, or on the other extreme, they are like textbooks where a lot of basics are given. So I thought it's a good idea to write a book which consolidates all the knowledge that's available out there in a comprehensive way. At the same time, written for a technologist. So it's like a book written by a technologist for a technologist. The ideal audience for this book are people who are technical people who are capable of building products. That is the primary audience of the book. But it can also be read by other functional specialists like people who are in finance, people who are even experienced in sales and marketing, who would like to build a technology based startup and a company that can scale to a much larger size company with a global scope. So it is meant for those kind of people, probably not necessarily for people who are coming entirely from a business side because they may already know most of the things that are described in the book. Yeah. See, you ask anyone about who is Edison, the typical answer is he's an inventor, he invented light bulb, he invented many other breakthrough things, he had so many patents and so on. Very rarely people recall that Edison was also co-founder of GE, one of the largest corporations which has been there for several years. And at the time Edison passed away, he was among the top 130 people in terms of wealth in the world. But there are not many examples of people like that who are technologists who are also successful in making big wealth. And if you go to understand Edison's life, Edison was a self taught person. And he started his first business when he was 15-year old. So, as he was also an inventor, he was also a businessman. And a person like that who is very, very talented in understanding customers, understanding markets, understanding how to build the right products, and maybe to some extent shrewd to be able to monetize his own ideas against competition, right? So such people don't need this book. That's the basic idea. So my point is, if somebody is as good as Edison or Dhirubhai Ambani, probably they don't need the book. They don't need frameworks and so on. So that's the reason of the title. And it is my belief that a good part of entrepreneurship can be learned. It doesn't have to be something that you are born with. Okay, like but in any other profession, when somebody is born with talents, they tend to become the best in the world. But other people also can make reasonable success. So that's the intention behind writing the book. See, most of the time when technical people start companies, they think about their product and their technology. And they're very proud of it. And that is where they start. And most of the thought process goes behind that. Whereas a real startup, a successful real startup, requires a lot of thought around how to build an organization, how to make it sustainable, how to make the product acceptable with the customer, and so on. So you have to first start with the customer and who needs the solution that you're building. Because technologists are generally people who are very used to answering solutions for problems. They're problem solvers, not necessarily people who will go discover the problem first. So that's the most important first message, that you build for a customer. You don't build without a customer in mind. And very often in the market there is different kind of guidance available on this. People say you should start with a problem and then find a solution. Don't worry about the solution. Whereas if you are a PhD or if you are a deeply technical person in a particular domain, you can't help it but start with a solution. It can happen. So in such cases, how do you find the right problem to solve with the solution? Okay. So talk about some of these things in the early part of the book, because in any deep tech product based startup, product is the most important thing. Okay, so it is not that the product is not very important, but it has to be targeted to the right customer. The second thing is when you start a startup, you have a bunch of assumptions. What you have is a lot of imagination, foresight, assumptions, vision, all of that. This has to be proven in the real market with customers. Okay, so it is very important for the founder to know how to convert a hypothesis into a reality. So how do you validate these hypotheses? How to make sure that these are really what actually happens in the world? So that's the second part. The third part, which is very important part of the message, is also that you have a foresight. How do you convert it into a forecastable business? A foresight has to become a forecast at some point in time. So how do you get there? Okay, and for that, what is the real proof that your startup is working? And the real proof is only data-based and evidence-based, and finally, finance-based. There has to be the financial angle, the monetary angle to that. So that's the third important point. And final important point is about fundraising. Because there's always a big hype around fundraising, as you see from the media, press, everywhere. So most startups think that fundraising is an indicator of success. In my opinion, it is an indicator of taking more responsibility. It is not an indicator of success by itself. The success happens only when you actually convert that fund that you raised into real money, right? Real wealth. So the last part of the book talks about if you are going after a venture capital for your funding, for your startup, how exactly should you do it? And what should be the right way to raise funding from venture capitalists? See, what I recommend is an approach where the reader first reads once across, not necessarily reading everything at every point, but try to sort of get a flavor of what is there in the book. Because this book is not meant to be read cover to cover. That is not how it is meant, but it has a sequence. It covers a certain sequence. So it's a good idea to just get an overview of everything. Then go deeper into the area that they are currently practicing. So suppose they are in the very early stages, maybe the early chapters are more relevant. If they are in fundraising, maybe the later chapters are more relevant. So they have to look what is relevant to them and go back and read that in more detail. And the second thing is the book has a lot of external links. I have not reproduced things that are available in public domain sometimes from the original authors themselves. So I have not tried to reproduce any of that in the book because there's so much of wisdom available out there. So all of those are available as links. So they can use those links and go into depth wherever they have to go into depth. How do you form a team? What should a CTO do? So there are books which talk just only on that. So they can go and understand in depth what that is. So they should use also the links to do. And ultimately the best way of using this book is to discover what kind of advisors you need. So that in real life when you face similar situations, you are not only looking at a book but also talking to people with experience. So getting a right coach or an advisor in every area that you require help is the best way to make your startup successful. So this book is only a companion to those pointers. The first next step I would say is please write a review in Amazon. That would be very helpful for others. So write what your impressions were, write about the book. But the immediate first step I would say is each chapter comes with a call for action. Okay, and these are certain guidelines that are given on in the context of the topic that is covered in the chapter. Even if you think that you are very good in that particular area and you have covered it very well, it's a good idea to go through those call for actions and try to do those actions. Okay, that's the immediate first step. Subsequently, find out in whichever chapters the insights are not sufficient. You can go back to the references in the book and go deeper into that. Or if nothing is helpful, please post back in our book's website about what your experience was, where you disagree with the book, or where you have a different experience to share, or of course your successes, where you found the book to be useful to you. So please post that in our website so that in the next editions we can improve it. Yeah, there is a book's website. They can reach out through that. Okay, and the book itself gives you ways to reach to the author. Yeah, I am available on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Otherwise, you can post me also on Twitter, which I don't as regularly watch, but is also possible. Okay. See, I have been a career R&D person, and I have been a technologist all my life. So even from my school days, I was very fascinated by technology and building things, building products. That's how I grew up, and I was fortunate to get good experience in companies like Wipro, Philips, HP, and finally NetApp. These were the technology companies where I was on the R&D side of things. And I've seen, as being an R&D person, I've seen many startups, even inside bigger companies. So whether you do a startup inside a bigger company or you do a startup with funding from other people or your own funding or whichever way, only the source of capital changes. But the challenges of building startups remain the same. And as part of my career, I did my own startup also a couple of times. And those startups have also taught me quite a lot of lessons in terms of what works and what doesn't work and so on. And about the year 2000, I have started researching on building companies, building startups, because that was not my natural background. I was not an MBA, I was a master's in technology. So I started learning about business, about uh, business books, going through business books and understanding those and so on. So what I realized is the standard MBA material just doesn't apply to startups because most of that is irrelevant. So about the time of 2000, where the lean startup movement started and all that, we could also see a lot of very interesting and very good ideas which were very applicable to startups. Like Steve Blank's initial work in this area, he defined what a startup actually means. So he starts with the definition of what a startup is. And many other people like Steve Blank who followed him have written on various tools, various methods of how to do things. But these are all not nicely collated in one place. So that was another purpose this book serves, that I'm trying to sort of collate those things in one place. And finally, there is a lot of reliance of the main entrepreneur for the success of the startup. So, talking about myself, that was my biggest insight that I learned after my first startup was that how much I was responsible for the startup's outcome, which was not very positive, right? So that taking accountability for that helped me understand how as a person I should change and how I should take advice, how I should receive coaching, how I should take the help of other people and so on. Okay. So even though I worked in multinational companies for a great part of my life, even in multinational companies, I've seen it's not that everything that they start is successful. Many things fail and they end up losing a lot of money as well, right? So the idea of this book is that the startup journey is a tough journey, and I have done that all through my life to almost 40 years. I've also my last job was also with a venture capital firm, so I also know the investor side of things. As an operating partner, I've seen close enough how venture capitalists work. So all that experience is what I've put together in the book, and that's basically what I am. And I intend to maybe spend the rest of my life also helping the startup ecosystem. See, the success of this book for me is certainly not the number of copies it sells. The success for me is even a few people come back and acknowledge that it helped their startups to be successful or their ideas to be taken to market at scale at a global level. That would be the greatest success I would consider for the book.